It's one of the strangest things you'll ever see on a map of the United States. A chunk of land, large and rugged, clinging to the top of Wisconsin like a shadow that doesn't belong. It's not part of Wisconsin. It's not its neighbor's territory. It's Michigan's. A jagged piece of earth jutting into Lake Superior, hundreds of miles from the rest of the state. No land bridge connects it. No border logic explains it. And yet, there it is, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, isolated and defiant. Most people never notice, but once you do, you can't unsee it. It raises a question that feels too obvious to ignore. Why does Michigan own that part of Wisconsin? Who decided that this was the way it should be? Was it a mistake, a quirk of geography, or something far more complicated? The answer isn't simple. It's a forgotten story buried beneath years of maps, laws, politics, and rivalry, a story of two regions fighting for a city, a standoff that nearly turned into a war, and a deal that gave away land nobody wanted until it became a treasure. It's about how one of America's weirdest state borders came to be, and why it still matters today. To understand it, you have to go back to a time when America's borders were not yet set in stone, a time when this nation was still finding its shape. The year was 1805, and the American map looked like a sketch of a dream, full of lines waiting to be drawn and lands waiting to be claimed. The territory of Michigan was officially created by Congress, carved from the larger Northwest Territory. It included much of what we now call Michigan, but back then, the focus was almost entirely on the Lower Peninsula. The Upper Peninsula, rocky, cold, and remote, was practically ignored. It was wilderness, nothing more. Settlers had no use for it. Surveyors barely explored it. It was land on a map, but nothing more. Meanwhile, further south, another border dispute was simmering. As new states joined the Union and territories grew, boundary lines were often fuzzy. One of the biggest issues was the line between the state of Ohio and the Michigan Territory. That line ran through a narrow, swampy strip of land along Lake Erie Place, known as the Toledo Strip. It stretched about 8 miles wide and nearly 470 square miles long. It wasn't just a patch of marshland. It was valuable, hugely valuable. Because at the western end of that strip sat the port city of Toledo, and whoever controlled it would control access to major trade routes via the Maumee River and Lake Erie. Ohio, which had become a state in 1803, claimed the strip. Michigan, still a territory in those early years, claimed it too. The issue lingered for decades, becoming more heated as both regions grew. By the early 1830s, the dispute boiled over. Michigan's territorial government, led by a fiery young acting governor named Stevens T. Mason, wasn't backing down. Neither was Ohio. Each side sent armed men to patrol the disputed area. Michigan built roads. Ohio built canals. And in 1835, the situation reached its boiling point. That year, the two sides faced off in what history now calls the Toledo War. It sounds dramatic, and in some ways it was, but it wasn't a traditional war. No large battles were fought. No armies clashed on open fields, but tensions were dangerously high. Militias from both sides were deployed. Arrests were made. Muskets were loaded. And for a moment, it truly looked like the United States might see its first civil conflict not over slavery or independence, but over who owned Toledo. President Andrew Jackson didn't want bloodshed. Congress didn't want chaos. So federal leaders stepped in and crafted a compromise. Ohio would get the Toledo Strip. Michigan, in return, would be compensated with the Upper Peninsula. The reaction in Michigan was almost unanimous. Outrage. To them, the deal was an insult. They were losing a thriving port city and being handed a vast wilderness that seemed cold, lifeless, and useless. Most people in Michigan thought the Upper Peninsula was worthless, an icy afterthought. But there was a catch. The federal government made it clear, if Michigan refused the deal, it wouldn't be allowed to become a state, and Michigan desperately wanted statehood. After months of debate, resistance, and even a second convention, Michigan finally accepted the terms. In 1837, it entered the Union as the 26th state, officially gaining both its lower and upper peninsulas. The Toledo Strip was now part of Ohio. Michigan's border was permanently changed. And a story was set in motion that no one could have predicted. Because what Michiganders saw as a punishment soon turned into a blessing. In the years that followed, surveyors and geologists began exploring the Upper Peninsula more thoroughly, and what they found was astonishing. Beneath the trees and rock, the UP was bursting with natural resources: iron, copper, timber, rivers that could be harnessed, forests that stretched for miles. The land Michigan had reluctantly accepted turned out to be a gold mine figuratively and, in some cases, literally. By the mid-1800s, mining towns were springing up across the UP. Iron from the Marquette Range was shipped across the Great Lakes to fuel factories in Detroit and Chicago. Copper flowed out of the Keweenaw Peninsula, helping power the electrification of the United States. Lumber from the vast pine forests fed sawmills and railroads. The economy of Michigan exploded, fueled in large part by the very land it had once dismissed. Immigrants from Finland, Sweden, Italy, Ireland, and beyond poured into the Upper Peninsula to work in the mines and mills. They built homes in the shadows of smokestacks. They carved out lives in a region where winter could last 6 months and the ground froze solid. It was a hard life, but it was a proud one. A unique culture emerged, rugged, resourceful, and fiercely local. The people of the UP, often called Upers, developed their own accent, their own traditions, and their own fierce independence. They weren't like people in Detroit or Grand Rapids. They weren't like people in Madison or Milwaukee either. They were Upers, and they liked it that way. But the question never went away. Geographically, the UP seems to make more sense as part of Wisconsin. It's connected to Wisconsin by land. Economically, Upers shop, work, and even cheer more with Wisconsin than with southern Michigan. Some residents have joked for decades that Wisconsin should just annex them. Others have floated ideas of forming their own state called Superior that would break away entirely. In fact, the idea of a state of Superior has popped up several times throughout history. In the 1850s, some leaders in the UP proposed forming a new state out of northern Michigan and parts of Wisconsin and Minnesota. The idea came and went. In the 1970s, a new version of the Superior movement emerged. But each time, it ran into the same problem. It's incredibly difficult to redraw state borders. It takes approval from the state legislatures involved and from Congress. And that's not likely to happen anytime soon. Meanwhile, the people of the UP have grown used to their odd status. They live in a land that's geographically part of one state, economically tied to another, and culturally unique from both. They endure brutal winters, heavy snowfalls, and long drives to anywhere. But they also enjoy the peace of the forests, the beauty of the Great Lakes, and a deep pride in who they are. Even today, crossing the Mackinac Bridge from the lower to the Upper Peninsula feels like entering another world. The air is different, the pace slows, cell phone signals fade, but the people smile. They nod at strangers. They wave from pickup trucks. It's not just a different part of Michigan, it's a different kind of America. So why does Michigan own that part of Wisconsin? Because once upon a time, the federal government tried to settle a border dispute by handing out land that no one thought was worth anything. Because Michigan, desperate to become a state, took the deal no one wanted. Because history has a way of making winners out of losers and fortune out of frustration. In the end, The Upper Peninsula is Michigan's not by accident, but by the strange logic of compromise and conflict. It's a piece of land born from rivalry, shaped by survival, and claimed by people who wouldn't want to live anywhere else. Maps don't always tell the full story. Lines on a page don't show the grit, the pride, or the surprising twists of fate that create them. But behind every strange border, there's a reason. And behind this one, there's a war, a bargain, and a land that proved everyone wrong. So the next time you look at a map and wonder why Michigan seems to own a part of Wisconsin, remember the Toledo War. Remember the copper mines and the iron veins. Remember the immigrants and the loggers and the Uppers who made that land home. And remember that sometimes the strangest parts of the map hold the most extraordinary stories. If you learned something new today, give this video a thumbs up. Drop a comment below. Have you ever visited the UP? Do you think it should still be part of Michigan? Or should it belong to Wisconsin or maybe even be its own state? And don't forget to subscribe. Because America's past is full of weird, surprising, and incredible stories like this one, and we've got so many more to tell.